I've played a lot of incredible games this year, and now that 2024 is at a close, I figured I'd rank every game I played for the first time from worst to best. A quick note that not all of these games were first released in 2024. This ranking will simply be covering games I had my first experience with this year. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe to see more rankings like this in the future, and let's start off with the worst game 2024 had to offer me. I admittedly haven't played much of this game. I beat the first boss, but didn't experience much past that. I was actually fairly engaged with the story and felt it to be very unique for a Souls-like, but ultimately the gameplay couldn't hold up. I thought it lacked identity and didn't have the standout strengths of other amazing FromSoft adjacent games like Lies of P. More so than any other genre, Souls-likes live and die by their combat, and Steel Rising's just doesn't cut the butter. I don't dislike Sifu, far from it, I just haven't played it that much, and I'm not filled with the desperate desire to experience it further. I'm sure I'll beat it one day, but for now it's just not at the top of my list. The combat system is one of the most creative I've seen and deserves all the praise it gets. The art style is distinct and the story from what I saw was at least solid. I really don't think Sifu deserves to be this low, but I had to consider which games I enjoyed more than others for this list, and ultimately I had less fun with it than the entries higher on the list. Yet another Souls-like I didn't play a whole lot of, and Notria is at least a notable step up from Steel Rising. I only played the demo, so this isn't a reflection of the entire game's quality, but what I did experience was enjoyable, if significantly dragged down by its flaws. The biggest of these is the way its levels are balanced. In most Souls-likes, the average enemy is fairly weak on their own, but it's the placements of these opponents that chips away at your health between checkpoints. Here, that same approach is taken, but the enemies are notably much more challenging alone than in other games in the genre. This made the levels pretty frustrating to get through, but the visuals are really strong, and I feel it has a more standout visual identity than most games which try to replicate From's style. At our number 12 spot is yet another game I haven't finished, but Shovel Knight is one I definitely expect to come back to and complete soon, as it's a really fun platformer. It has great character designs and a cool retro style, though the gameplay isn't the most crisp. It's good enough to be enjoyable, but it does hold the game back from being one of my favourite platformers. That's the meat of this entry. I like this game, but it didn't quite make its mark on me as much as the titles higher on this list. Inscription is a game positively oozing with style. The art direction is truly incredible, and it combines my love for strategy card games and cryptic stories. I really enjoyed trying to uncover the lore of this mysterious cabin while tackling some relatively challenging card duels in the process. The draw of this game really is in the style, but alongside that it manages to deliver some really strong gameplay as well. Inscription is a great game, but I played a lot of really good games this year, and ultimately I didn't love playing this quite as much as the higher entries. My time with the finals didn't last all that long, but I did feel like it was a very well made game. The gunplay was crisp, the map design was excellent, and the gameplay loop was overall just really enjoyable. The biggest detriment is that I feel this is the kind of game that is infinitely more fun with friends, and mine barely played this one. When they stopped playing it, my desire to play the finals tapered out as a result, but despite that I did enjoy every round I played, and think this was a really well constructed experience across the board. This is probably going to be my most controversial opinion on this list. Before I played this game, all I had heard was how it was the best game in the series, how it was a vast improvement on the first. Having experienced it for myself, I just couldn't disagree more. Little Big Planet 3 is one of my absolute favourite games of all time. Its greatest strength being how well it blends online play with a truly standout story mode. I feel much of the LBP2 experience was lost on me since I couldn't play the online experiences, so I'm solely basing my opinion on its story mode. But where the third game in the trilogy provides an incredibly fun platforming adventure with excellent level design, a phenomenal soundtrack and gripping story, LBP2 just feels weaker in all those areas. The soundtrack is my least favourite of the three games. The story is a step up from the first, but it still doesn't match up to the third, and the level design is so many leagues behind LBP3. I never expected to miss the hub worlds as much as I did playing the first two games, but it really made me realise how much it helped tie LBP3's levels together, where the second game really falls short of the first, despite its superior level design and story, is in the charm and atmosphere of the game. LBP1 had such such a distinct identity in its score and visuals, especially the Mexican wedding. That level is just incredible. On the other hand, Little Big Planet 2 just didn't stick out to me. It just felt like a solid platformer that I enjoyed, but not enough to consider it one of the best games I've played this year. I don't think Jedi Survivor is quite as strong an experience as Fallen Order. There are some narrative aspects I feel are stronger, but I think the overall thematic through line just isn't quite as good. The gameplay here is definitely an improvement though, as you'd expect from any sequel worth playing. I know on release Survival is riddled with issues, but even an entire year later I still have plenty of bugs which did affect my playthrough, if not enough to ruin it for me. It's not like the second entry in the series is much worse than the first, it just falls a little short in some significant areas that ultimately meant I didn't enjoy it quite as much. Still definitely a good game though. Sea of Thieves was a game I didn't play for too long. The phase only lasted about a month, but that month was certainly a fun one. I'll discuss my critiques of the game first. The combat isn't great, the gameplay does feel slow, so the game isn't as fun as it potentially could be with smooth mechanics. But the main issue holding this game back is that there's just no incentive to keep playing. The only use for the money you get from playing the game is cosmetic items, which is fine for the initial hours of the game, but after around 20 hours, you will have likely unlocked all the cosmetics you want and have nothing to work towards. So why do you keep playing? To unlock other cosmetics you'll never use? To sabotage other players from unlocking their own cosmetics? Single player story games don't have this issue, but in a multiplayer it's really important to give your players a reason to keep playing, be it the gameplay loop or new unlockables. That's ultimately why I stopped playing this game. As for what I did like about the game, well, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, so I don't think I can say anything more than will be shown in this video.
Watch. When I drop him.
I don't want to drop my cat to you after what you did to that guy yesterday.
Watch this.
Yeah.
No, don't drown my cat.
I'm here.
Ready?
No, stop
Fire him out of a cannon.
See ya, buddy.
Marvel Rivals is the newest game on this list, so it's one I'm still experiencing now. My time with Rivals definitely isn't over yet, but I've played it a lot since release, so I think this placement should be pretty accurate. I loved the first Overwatch, but the sequel doesn't improve upon it in a single way. Every single change they made was a negative one. Pair that with Blizzard's decline as a company, and it's clear why Overwatch 2 is one of my least favourite games of all time. Rivals doesn't really do much to detach itself from its clear inspiration, but does that really matter when the experience it provides is so vastly superior to the competition? It has great characters, great maps, great gameplay. Basically everything about this game is what you want it to be. I have some issues with the current pool of tanks not being particularly fun to play, but I'm always free to use DPS or healer. My biggest criticism is the exact same as my biggest problem with Overwatch, in that winning or losing games is entirely dependent on the competence of your teammates. The significance of your own performance is pretty low. I don't really enjoy my games where my team is just getting completely destroyed because I have 4 DPS, including an Iron Man who refuses to acknowledge how useless that character actually is. This could be amended by a role queue, but the issue is that if you want to play DPS, you'll end up having 5+ minute queues. It's something that will probably always hold this game, and any similar, back from a higher ranking, but that's not to give the impression I don't like this game. I'm thoroughly enjoying it, more so than any other online multiplayer right now. The predecessor to this year's Game of the Year, Astro's Playroom is a really enjoyable platformer experience that truly does capture some of the magic of Mario Galaxy, while setting itself apart with an incredible protagonist. It's because of this experience that Astrobot is the game I'm most interested to play in the future. While it is very short, every second of that runtime is incredible, creative and fun, with crisp gameplay, fantastic sound design and great level design. The only aspect of the game I didn't enjoy was the usage of the DualSense's motion controls. We saw this feature used in the Switch back in 2017 and implemented now with the PS5, and even all these years later I still think it's a terrible feature that never feels great to use. That minor gripe aside, the power-ups are well designed and the game is just so incredible for not even costing anything that it's one of the best games I've played in a long time. I touched on this game a little when talking about its sequel, but essentially I think LBP's greatest strength is its charm and uniqueness, and the distinct vibes that each world and level gives off. It doesn't have nearly as polished level design or narrative structure as LBP2, but it's not like those were anywhere close to a masterpiece in that entry anyway. The things that set Little Big Planet apart from other platformers are just stronger here in my eyes, so I enjoyed the game much more as a result. Wukong is probably the most popular game to release this year, breaking record player counts on Steam and winning Player's Voice at the Game Awards. It's clear how much of an impact it made. Of the nominated entries, from what I've seen, Wukong should have won Game of the Year. I do think Shadow of the Erdtree is leagues better, but I'm in the camp that DLC shouldn't be eligible for Game of the Year. Black Myth isn't really a Souls-like, it's more of an action RPG, but it does have plenty of elements of Souls games that appeal to me as a die-hard fan of FromSoft's work. Unfortunately, I don't think this game is as strong as FromSoft's best games, and doesn't compare to Lies of P, my Game of the Year for 2023. That aside, it's an incredible experience, with breathtaking visuals and amazing art direction. My one gripe is just a major one, in that I don't think any of the bosses were anywhere close to the bar of quality set by FromSoft. Being a game entirely focused on its bosses, with mediocre level design, I really wish there were more standout encounters to make this truly a masterpiece, but I still loved it anyway. I flipped back and forth on which game I prefer between this and Black Myth. I ultimately had to settle on one, and I feel the charm and uniqueness of Crab Souls gives it a slight edge in my memory. When I look back on my playthroughs with both, I remember enjoying this game that little bit more strongly, and obtained the Platinum Trophy in just 6 days, whereas I have no desire to seek it out in Wukong. Not yet, anyway. The combat here is pretty great, and while I have similar disappointments to Black Myth in the bosses falling far short of FromSoft's catalogue, this game just has so much style and flair, with incredibly visually distinct areas and fantastic gameplay, with perhaps my favourite story of a game this year. It's a simple Souls-like, but it's different, well designed and charming, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time with it. Maybe Black Myth is a higher quality game on the whole, but in my books, Crab Souls gets a slight edge. I'm certain most people who played this game wouldn't view it this positively. I know it's a very unpopular game. I think that largely comes from just how good Salt and Sanctuary is, and how much of a downgrade this sequel is. I don't disagree with that, but I still enjoyed the sequel so much. I got the Platinum Trophy in just over a week, multiple playthroughs which I mostly enjoyed, despite some glaring flaws. The boss quality on the whole isn't great, with the mages being pretty repetitive and never amazing, but Salt and Sanctuary never had incredible bosses anyway. Sacrifice does admittedly have my least favourite boss in any game ever, in the fight with Mariga Gradania in New Game Plus specifically. That's a point I will mention. New Game Plus in this game is so obnoxious. It just ramps up the damage of every enemy far more than the player is capable of keeping up with, leading to some bosses becoming completely unbalanced. Mariga Gradania's ads one-shot me with every attack. Aside from those small gripes, Sacrifice does improve on Sanctuary. The combat is much better, with the weapon arts adding so much more depth to each encounter, and the movement being far smoother and more precise. The player customization is also better, thanks to a wider array of armor, and being able to freely craft boss gear was a great addition. Another excellent inclusion was the addition of online play, allowing for PvP or co-op. It isn't the easiest thing to access, and I wish they'd given you the ability to engage with it earlier in the game, but it is still really fun when you do unlock it. Sacrifice is definitely a weaker game than its predecessor, but despite its glaring flaws, I still enjoyed my time with it more than any other game this year. So that's my ranking of every game I played in 2024. Obviously there are some pretty controversial takes in there, and I don't expect you to agree with all of them, so feel free to respectfully leave your own subjective opinions in the comments. For my next couple of uploads, I'm torn between ranking the top 10 best and worst areas in the Souls series, or just doing a general top 10 bosses list, not solely restricted to FromSoft games. If you have a preference, please let me know, and I hope I'll see you in my next video.